All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. We have a busy March underway, although for a lot of schools, you are on March break right now. So some of you will be catching this via YouTube afterwards. So we hope you're able to tune in and check out our latest Parks Canada event. For those who are with us, especially classrooms, out on the West Coast and places on the East Coast, it is good to have you along for this week. So the last few months, and actually the last few years, we've been having a lot of fun doing exciting virtual education programs with the Western Mountain Parks. So parks like Jasper and Waterton Lakes, Banff, Kootenay, Glacier, and Yoho National Parks. And each of these programs has been sharing a unique story. So giving us a look behind the scenes at some of these parks, showing us amazing places and getting to really spend some time with some amazing Parks Canada experts. So these events have all been fun. They've been interactive presentations. We've explored a variety of topics like wildlife conservation, archaeological history, protecting our species at risk, and a whole lot more. So today, we are asking the question about things you may have noticed on your last walk out in the forest. Maybe you saw fallen logs, dead trees. Maybe you saw the leaves weren't quite the colors you were expecting, or even bare trees. So you might have thought, how did this come to be? Why does this look like this? Well, lucky for you, today we have the Forest Health team at Mount Revelstoke and Glacier National Parks who are going to spend a little time with us and hopefully help us solve some of that mystery and identify the culprit. So I'm going to grab Laura from backstage. We have Laura hanging out with us. Hey, Laura, how are you doing today?
Hi, Joe. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I'd like to start today with a little bit of a land acknowledgement. So Parks Canada respectfully acknowledges that Mount Revelstoke National Park, Glacier National Park, and Rogers Pass National Historic Site are located within the traditional lands of the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, the Sinixt, and the Syilx Okanagan peoples. We recognize their stewardship of the lands and waters in the area since time immemorial, and Parks Canada is committed to reconciliation and renewed relationships with Indigenous peoples based on the recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. Now, thanks for having me today. I'd like to share with you a little story that happened to me in the fall. So I've been living in Revelstoke for about a year now, and I love discovering the forest. The forest here is the temperate inland rainforest, and it looks pretty magical. And so I'd like to share with you a little walk in the forest that I went through last fall. Joe, can you play my video, please?
Dear Diary, today I set out to go on an adventure. As temperatures started to drop and leaves started to fall, I was feeling a strong urge to go into the mountains. And with Mount Revelstoke and Glacier National Parks just outside my door, I felt like something was out there waiting for me. It's like the mountains were calling my name and inviting me to visit them one last time before winter truly sets in. Snow had already started to creep down the mountains, so this was my chance. The inland temperate rainforest of the Columbia Mountains holds a special place in my heart, so I decided to go there first. The fresh mountain air felt really good today. It's significantly colder up here than in town. I was lucky that it wasn't raining, as it does most days this time of year. The amount of moisture here makes the forest look magical, and I love trying to identify my surroundings on a walk like this. Short trees, tall trees, fallen trees, fallen trees, fallen trees. Wait, what? Why are there so many fallen trees? Maybe I can find out more about these if I investigate closer. I don't think I know enough about this. I think the mountains were sending me on a quest today, and I'll have to find out more about these fallen trees before winter settles in. This doesn't leave me much time. Dear Diary, I can't stop thinking about my walk in the forest from yesterday. Why all the fallen trees? I have to figure out what happened to the forest. Beavers? No, I don't think so. I couldn't see any signs of their teeth on the fallen trees or nearby stumps. Fire? Neither. There were no burn marks anywhere. Logging? Surely not in a national park. Maybe an avalanche? I think there were too many standing trees around for that to be the case. After a day of looking through literature, 2 options remained. I was either looking at a diseased tree or an insect infestation. Either way, I would have to act fast if I was going to save the forest before winter. A good night's sleep was doctor's orders. Dear Diary, today I decided to bring an expert with me on the field. Our destination? Glacier National Park. The arrival of snow had brought a sense of urgency upon my mission, and the Illecillewaet Valley felt like a good place to start. Peter is part of our resource conservation team at Mount Revelstoke and Glacier National Parks. He's very knowledgeable about the forest, and I was hoping he would help me complete my quest. I showed Peter the evidence I had collected in the rainforest in Mount Revelstoke National Park. He proceeded to explain his theory.
Hi there. Looking at this photo here, I suspect that what killed this tree is probably not logging or fire or anything like that, but might be the thing that kills most trees that we find dead in Mount Revelstoke and Glacier National Parks, which is either some sort of insect outbreak or a disease like a fungal pathogen. Insect outbreaks and fungal diseases are a natural part of the ecosystem here in the interior rainforest. And an important source of disturbance and renewal for our ecosystem. One of the things you'll notice driving through Glacier National Park and Rogers Pass is there's a large number of dead spruce trees like this one. What's happening here is that we're having a natural outbreak of spruce bark beetle. Spruce bark beetle burrows into the inner layer of the bark called a phloem in the tree and eats that kind of green tissue underneath the bark that transports nutrients from the needles of the tree down into the roots. And when it does that, it actually brings a fungus along with it, called blue stain fungus. And together, those two can actually choke off nutrient flow in the tree, eventually killing it. This is a natural disturbance that has been going on for several years now. It's part of the natural disturbance process for the forest, where older trees are killed, and that creates space and light for other things to grow.
Another reason why you might see stressed or dying trees is for another group of insects, moths and butterflies. This tree here has been impacted by the caterpillar of a moth called the western hemlock looper. And those caterpillars like to eat the bases of the needles of trees like this western hemlock. Because they don't directly attack the bark of the tree like spruce bark beetle would, this has a less immediate impact on the trees. Trees can lose their needles for a year and still be healthy and bounce back in the following year. But if they are attacked over and over again by the hemlock looper and they keep losing their needles, well, needles are what make the sugars from photosynthesis that the tree eats. So if they're not getting in a meal for years, then eventually that can starve and kill the tree.
So there's lots of different species of insects, mites, fungi that feed on and rely on trees and are an important part of the ecosystem that are native to our 2 national parks here. Most of the time, these species exist at low levels that are in balance with the rest of the forest, and we don't see a lot of mortality in big swaths of forest in our big mature trees. What can happen, though, is if the conditions are just right, those populations can start to grow really quickly. And if they grow really quickly, they can produce so many babies that now there's too many babies for the predators and parasites to eat. When that occurs, we get conditions that we might call an outbreak. So that's what's occurring with a number of different species in Glacier National Park right now. We're experiencing outbreaks of spruce bark beetle, western hemlock looper, and western black-headed budworm, among a couple others that are not as noticeable. This is something that's pretty normal. Outbreaks usually happen on a regular time scale, and it's something you would expect. And it just so happens that we have multiple outbreaks that are happening close to the highway right now that are easy for people to notice. One of the issues is that as a tree is standing there dying because it's been attacked by an insect, it begins to be attacked by all kinds of other things because there's lots of nutrients locked up in the wood of the tree that other things like to eat, like funguses. And as those funguses work their way in and start eating the wood, they break down and wood becomes less strong, it starts to rot, and then the tree might be at risk of falling over if there's a sudden gust of wind. You notice here in the interior temperate rainforest, our trees get really big, they're really tall, and if they fall over, they can do a lot of damage. So in areas like campgrounds, trailheads, parking lots, places where there's infrastructure, where people spend a lot of time and might be at risk of being hurt or a building or a car being damaged when the tree comes down, we're actually going in and removing these trees before they get so rotten that we can't safely cut them down anymore. And then cleaning it up, because we don't want to leave a lot of debris around that might create a fire hazard, as a safety precaution.
Dear Diary, seems like everything is fine after all. I learned that dead trees are an important part of forest regeneration and that they help biodiversity by creating habitat as well as allowing new growth to take place. I can finally conclude that the fallen trees I found on the trail in Mount Revelstoke National Park were most likely affected by insects or a fungal pathogen and were cut down for public safety. I'm so excited to see what new things will grow. We can thank little critters like the spruce beetle, the western hemlock looper, and the western black-headed budworm for allowing part of this process to take place. They may be tiny, yet they're mighty. Winter has now set in, and I'm grateful for experts like Peter who help monitor our forests and who make it their duty to protect these special places. I wonder what my next quest in the mountains will be.
Hi, thanks everyone. So I hope you enjoyed my little adventure here, and I'm super glad that I learned so much from this adventure. I learned that the forest actually changes a lot, even if humans aren't there. Trees will die and other trees will grow, and they need natural disturbances like insect outbreaks and diseases and fire and avalanches for it to change and keep evolving. I'd like to introduce you guys to my colleague Jacob, who is our forest health specialist here. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, everyone.
So, Jacob, what is your job? What do you do for the national parks?
My job is like a detective, and I think you showed some of that in your movie, Laura. You have to be a detective to really find what happened to these trees that were just fallen or standing dead. And my job is kind of like that. I am looking at around 7 national parks in the mountains here, and I'm first walking around and driving around, going on trails, look for trees that are either dead or just dying, and trying to figure out what is causing this disturbance. And then I go into the helicopter and I fly all the parks, all the valleys, and then I can have a little map, and I will map all these places where these trees, dead trees or sick trees are, and I produce a little report for our operations in parks, that so they are aware that there's a big concentration of dead trees caused by this insect or by this disease in this area, and that they can be aware of it. And if, like Peter was explaining in this little movie, if those trees are in areas that would threaten public safety, that they can be removed. So yeah, my job is a detective job, really.
That's awesome. Say if our friends here were to go on a walk in the forest, is there things that they could see and notice and recognize as signs of insects?
Oh yes, there are so many billions or millions of insects everywhere, but there's like this title of this program says, they are so tiny. Like the spruce beetle that Peter was talking about is super tiny little insect, but when they are in big numbers, that's when we start to notice them. And when you are in the forest, you can actually see signs or symptoms, we call it, of those activity of these insects. Sometimes you will see that in the bark there is little tiny signs of bored wood, like little remains that those beetles create when they bore in. And you have to be very careful, though. It's not, you have to be very watchful and observant to be able to see, unless you see already a dead tree. And usually when you see that, the insects are gone. They already did their job. They fed, they reproduced in this tree, and then they went to another tree. So if you really want to see the insect in action, you have to be very detailed and trying to find those little signs of activity there.
Okay, so see, if I was walking in the woods and I saw some sawdust on the ground, would that be
Sawdust.
a sign? Yeah.
That's exactly, I was missing that word. Yes, sawdust.
Wonderful. Cool. And how about the other insects we talked about? How about some moths? What could we see maybe of their impacts?
Right. So the bark beetles, the tiny little creatures, are very, they can be very powerful, and they can kill the tree within one cycle, 1 year. But there are a lot of other things, like Peter was also showing signs of feeding by larvae. Larvae are those caterpillars that later change into either moths or butterflies. But before they do it, they they feed on usually the foliage. The foliage is just leaves and needles, and sometimes buds of trees, because they are really nice and soft and fresh, usually first thing in spring. So that's what they go for. And yes, you can see those actually quite more likely than you would see bark beetle, because they can be seen eating those leaves away and needles. And you can see those little caterpillars. They actually can be pretty big too, and you can sometimes hear them as they are munching away. So it's a pretty cool thing.
That's pretty cool. Thanks, Jacob. I'll definitely pay more attention next time I go on a walk in the woods. Awesome. Are there any questions from the students or the classrooms that we could answer?
All right. Well, first I want to start off, Laura and Jacob, with a big thank you. Thank you for taking us on a little adventure into the park and teaching us about, those decomposers and how powerful and mighty they are. And I think that really important fact that we don't want to stop that. We want to let that keep happening. It's just part of the natural kind of cycle and rhythm of the forest. It helps the biodiversity and so many other things. Very, very cool. So to our classrooms who are tuning in via YouTube, you can use the chat sidebar and start sending us in some questions. I've got some camera classes backstage who I'm going to visit shortly. But before we do, I have a little Kahoot quiz ready to go. So you can probably hear the music already in the background. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to play a little Kahoot together, see what we learned before we get right into our Q&A action. So for those who might be new to Kahoot, if you visit kahoot.it, it's going to bring up a screen where it asks you for a PIN number. And there you want to put in the number here, 1557835. So if you happen to be in a classroom with tablets or Chromebooks or something like that at your seat, you can join right at your desk. If not, your teacher could put this up at the front of the classroom and you could shout out your answers to him or her. Now, we often have classrooms or students joining us from home, so you can use that QR code with your phone or your tablet. Give it a quick scan and it will bring you into the quiz. So we can see some auto-generated animal names coming up there for us, like the knowing bobcat, the Captain Lobster, and the red mouse. We'll give it another few seconds to get a few more classes and or students in place, and then we'll do our little Kahoot. So there's 5 questions today. There's some true and false. There's some multiple choice. You have 20 seconds to answer those questions. If the answer is right, we have points for you. If the answer is right and you do it really quickly, you get even more points. If you put the wrong answer in super fast, we got nothing for you. We need that right answer. So make sure you read the question carefully before you put your answer in. So I think we are ready to start our Kahoot quiz. So let's get it rolling. All right. First question coming up on deck for you. It is a multiple choice. What is a natural disturbance? Is it when your sibling annoys you? Is it a style of dance? Is it an event that changes nature? Or is it a type of cheese? So what is a natural disturbance? An annoying sibling, a style of dance, an event changing nature, or a type of cheese. You got a few more seconds to get an answer in. All right, good job, crew. No fooling you. While siblings can be annoying, I know I have 3 younger siblings, but it is an event that changes nature. Very, very cool. All right, let's take a look at our leaderboard. The creative wolf is holding down that top spot. Here we go. We got a true and false coming your way. Spruce bark beetles can allow fungi to enter trees and block nutrient flow. So true or false that the spruce bark beetles can allow fungi to enter the tree as well? True or false? You still have, oh, there we go. All the answers are in nice and quick. So that is true. Good job, crew. And then that can lead to nutrients, the flow of nutrients being blocked, and then the death of that tree. All right, lots of movement on the board, but the creative wolf is not letting go. We have another true and false coming your way. Forests always stay the same if humans leave them alone. So is that true or false? If we just leave the forest alone, it's going to stay the same. It's not going to change. True or false? Humans leave the forest alone. Oh, good job, crew. Nobody went for true on that one. That is absolutely false. It's natural for forests to change. It's natural for ecosystems to change. Of course, humans can speed up that change and change it in different ways, but it is normal for forests to be changing. All right, creative wolf is still holding down that spot. We have 2 more questions to go. What is photosynthesis? So is it a synonym for a selfie? Is it the process that trees and green plants use to make sugar? Is it a musical instrument, or is it a famous novel? You've still got about 10 seconds to get an answer in. Is it a selfie, a process of plants making sugar? Oh, there we go. Good job, crew. It is absolutely plants taking that carbon dioxide, taking that light, and producing those sugars. All right, last question. True or false? Dead trees help biodiversity. True or false? True or false? Dead trees help biodiversity. Those answers coming in pretty quick. I think, yep, you beat the timer again. That is absolutely true. Dead trees help biodiversity. They release nutrients back into the soil. They help new growth. So all kinds of good things happen when those trees do die in the forest. Okay, let's look at our podium. 3rd place, we have the genius deer. In 2nd place, we have the happy orcs. And in 1st place, do we have a change? No, the creative wolf held the lead from tape to tape. So if you were the creative wolf in your classroom, give yourselves a pat on the back. Good job playing our Kahoot today. All right, Laura, Jacob, what do you think? Should we get into some Q&A action?
Let's do it.
For sure.
So I'm going to visit some camera classrooms in just a minute, but we do have some questions that already came in via YouTube. So we have a 3rd grade class here, looks like Edward's crew, and they are curious about the most common insect that you might find in the trees around the national park.
Wow, that's a really good question. I think, as you noticed, it changes, right? So historically, you may see one insect, and then it does its job, and then something happens, and that causes those insects to die off, and then there is another time when other insects are the most common. But for now, if we were talking about right now, there is 2 major bark beetles that are causing problems to trees in Glacier and Mount Revelstoke National Parks. Those are spruce beetle, that was shown in the film, and the other one is western balsam bark beetle, and that beetle is feeding on high elevation forests, mostly on subalpine fir. So on different trees, each tree has its own little beetle that is causing its troubles. So those 2 would be the most common ones right now.
All right. I think that's just another kind of amazing thing about nature is how it can specialize in that way. So it's a bit of a risky strategy. If there's lots of those trees around, it works well. But if something happened to that food source, then that could be trouble for the beetles too. All right. Let's get some camera classrooms in here. So that classroom, those 3rd graders were from Fort McLeod, Alberta. So send us in some more questions if you have some. We are going to go now to another group in Alberta, some fourth graders. Let me get them in. I see them waiting at the camera. Hey, fourth graders.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay. Question. I need to see.
My question is for Jacob. What are the 7 national parks you study?
Okay, let's start with Mount Revelstoke. That's the one. Glacier National Park, Jasper National Park, Banff National Park, Yoho National Park, Kootenay National Park, and Waterton Lakes National Park.
Thank you.
All right, looks like we got another one on deck.
How many dead trees are there?
Huh. Now that is $1 million question. So we don't really count the trees. What we do, we measure how much area they are taking. So for example, if there is a lot of insects killing those trees, you would see many clumps of trees on the landscape. So when I fly in the helicopter, I have a little tablet with the map, and I'll make a circle around those trees that are dying or they're dead, and I say what it is, and then I say how severe this damage is. And then when I come back to the office, I'll calculate what area this little blob is taking. So when there's a lot of insect killing the trees, we are talking about thousands of hectares sometimes. And sometimes it's only 100 or 200 hectares. But we usually mark them as area. So we talk how many, not how many trees, but how many hectares are affected by insect pest.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
I think let's grab one more, and then we'll go to another camera classroom. Is there one more there? Yeah.
You have a question?
How much animals do you guys usually see there?
That's a very good question too. I don't see many because they are hiding when they see me. But if Laura is going to the forest, I'm sure she sees more. So it really depends on when you are going on for your trips. Excuse me. Sometimes in the summer or in winter, and different animals like different times of the day to wander around. So it's really tricky to say, but I didn't see very many. The most I see here in the Kootenay National Park, where I am right now, are those bighorn sheep. We see them almost every day.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacob. I think when we go to the national parks, one of our goals is to try and not see them. Especially when we're thinking about bears, we want to keep them wild and make sure that they find their natural food sources and that they're not affected by humans.
Thank you.
All right, we'll try to come back your way. We'll see if we can squeeze in another question or two. I want to go to a classroom now. They are hanging out with us in British Columbia. Looks like some more third graders. So let me bring them in here front and center. ABC, how we doing?
Hi. Can bears damage trees? Can bears damage trees in the forest?
Bears can damage trees in the forest. You're absolutely right, for sure.
Yeah, I think he's curious how. Yeah.
Oh, how? So they usually will scrape the bark with their paws, and they will, when something is itching them, they will also scratch their back. And sometimes they will climb the tree and make some marks, and they make some injuries to the trees. So they don't really kill the trees, but they can make other things like fungi, that Peter was talking about, and little insects enter the tree once the bark is stripped, because it's so easy for these different creatures to enter the tree and then make it, more damaged. So they don't kill the trees, but they can damage them.
All right, looks like we got someone else on deck.
Hey, question. How much bugs do you guys have what damage the trees?
How many bugs? How many species, you mean? How many different types? Oh,
Yes.
that's a good question. I think there's probably about 15 to 20 major little species of insects that we see causing some damage. And then sometimes when the conditions are right, different ones arrive that are also. So I would say between, 20 maybe to 30 different species causing problems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Great questions from our crew
Yeah.
in BC. Oh, is that one more sneaking in there? All right, let's grab one more.
Does the fungus like naturally grow on dead trees, or does it just like get there?
Yes, everything that you see in the forest is growing naturally there, and it's needed there. They fulfill some role in the ecosystem. They help to decompose those trees that are, already killed, and they're already dying, and there's a lot of nutrients in those killed trees. So the fungi make those nutrients available to other creatures that may need them. So yeah, absolutely natural.
All right, good question, bud.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, great questions from our crew in BC. I'm going to visit another camera classroom in just a second, but I want to grab another question or two here from YouTube. So the first one I have here is from Megan. Megan wants to know, insects can knock down trees, but are there other ways that trees can fall down in the forest? Other threats or things that can knock them down?
Absolutely. No, this is an excellent question, especially now with climate change, that we are seeing different ways how trees can be killed. And one of them is drought, lack of water. So if the trees are suffering from drought and they cannot intake enough water, they will start dying, and they can get as killed as by insects, right? So there's one major way right now. That's what we're seeing quite a lot. The other way is flooding. So for example, the rivers can run free and they can flood the trees, and trees don't grow in the water, not these trees anyway, that in our national parks here. So they suffocate and they cannot live in these conditions, and they are waterlogged and they die off too. So that's another way. And another one is avalanches. I think Laura was also mentioning that this can also disturb area and kill trees. When avalanche is coming down the mountain, it can take a lot of trees with it. So those are kind of three major things that, other than insects and disease, that kill trees. And I didn't mention fires, of course, right? Fire can, and this is of course a big issue, and you've seen it probably last year. So drought, fires, flooding, avalanche, all these things kill trees.
All right. I'm going to come back for a couple more YouTube questions, but before I do, I want to bring in our next camera class. So they're joining us. Looks like it's a big group of them, some third graders in Airdrie. So let me bring them in here front and center. It looks like it's Miss Chapman's class and Miss Wall's class. I bet they're really loud. Let's see. How are we doing today? All right.
So one of our students was wondering, how do the bugs survive the winter so they can keep harming the trees?
That is a great question. So if you noticed, or maybe not noticed, but you heard in this little film that caterpillars eat leaves and then they change into moths or butterflies. And then these moths are laying eggs, right? And these eggs are usually that form of the bug that is attached somewhere on a little twig, somewhere that, it can survive the winter just as an egg. Those eggs are very, very frost hardy, and they can withstand harsh weather. So that's one way. The other way, if you remember about bark beetles, they go under the bark, and they also produce offspring in there. So we call them little larvae as well. And these larvae, when they are developing under the bark, they are protected from all the snow, all the cold, and it really takes a really severe cold to kill them off. So they are usually pretty well protected, and they can survive winter just fine.
All right.
Good question.
Great question.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a few more hands. Let's see what's going to come our way next. No? Okay. All right. That's okay. If they do have another question, send me a message in the private chat and I'll bring them back in. Okay, we've got another question here. Okay, I like this one. So centipedes, are they decomposers and are they common in the forest?
What was the question again? Can you repeat?
Yeah, Miss Edwards' class is wondering, are centipedes decomposers and are they common in the forest?
Yes, they are. And they are decomposers, of course. Absolutely. Yeah, they, again, it depends where you go in the forest. You can find different areas specialized and different bugs and organisms specialized in these areas, and usually they are there for the reason, right?
Yeah.
And absolutely, those can be also decomposers for sure.
Okay, and then there's another good question here. We didn't talk a lot about tools. What are some tools you would bring in the field with you to check out trees and their health?
No, this is an excellent question again, because the detective work requires tools, right? So I do have a few tools in my pockets. Usually those are wood chisels. And if I see those little sawdust in the bark, I usually try to dig in the tree to check what is the culprit. What if this is really a bark beetle, I will find it behind this bark. So I will need to chip away a little bit of bark to check if that's what it is. Another tool is just a shovel. I have a shovel and I dig in the roots, because sometimes you don't see any signs on the tree, but it may be something digging, something munching on the roots, and I want to dig a little bit of the root and see if there's anything there. So shovel is useful. Chisels are useful, and then when I fly in the helicopter to map these things, I have a little tablet, and this tablet has a map and GPS that can help me to draw things on it. So those are the major tools: maps, tablet, and some hand tools like chisels and hammer and and the shovel.
All right, very cool. Well, let's we've got a couple minutes left, so let's see if we have anything else there. Our grade 4s, our group with Madame Nancy in BC, give me a wave if you want me to come back to your classroom. We can grab another question before we log off, and then I can also grab something from YouTube as well. We still have a few more questions there. All right, looks quiet in the classroom, so I'm going to grab this one from YouTube. I think this is a great question. So when it's happening naturally, you don't intervene, but is there ever a time where there's an outbreak where you do have to intervene, where you have to do something?
Excellent question. Yes. So in national parks, we try to not intervene, because those processes that we see are natural, and that's what we also try to protect. But sometimes, like you say, when things get out of control too much and they are actually threatening campgrounds, for example, there is a lot of trees near the campground, dead trees near the campground, and they become a threat to visitors, then we have to do something with them. We need to remove these trees. Also, there is when there is a big outbreak going on within the parks, sometimes the neighboring jurisdictions will ask us to try to help limit those outbreaks so they don't spread to other managed forests. So we work with these jurisdictions as well, trying to find solutions how we can do it. How would nature do it? And do you know how the nature would do this? It would burn these trees, because fires are also natural. So what we often do, we have special prescribed fires that will kill those areas that are affected by some insect outbreaks, and that way we can limit natural way these outbreaks. So yeah, there are tricks and there are different ways of doing this, but we try to not intervene at all if we don't have to.
Yeah, very cool. We've had some events with the parks where they've shared the prescribed burns, and the team that goes out and does that. Very, very cool work, very important work, but
yes,
yeah, very cool. Okay, 2 more questions before we wrap up. Surprises, unusual bugs, maybe that you didn't expect to find in an area. So maybe invasive species or something like that.
Yes, those would be the usual surprises, invasive species that we don't expect in our parks. And they are really tricky to find sometimes, but we have to have our eyes really open when we do our surveys. We check for those different signs and of damage, and sometimes we do see an invasive species out there. But we work with other jurisdictions on kind of monitoring for these, and this is they help us with some pheromone trapping, and those are usually the special tools that we put out in the forest that would attract those invasive species, and then we can first to know if they are there or not. Second, we can count them and see how many of them are already in the area, and then we can also strategize some response or control. So if there's many, not too many of them so far, but we have our radars on a special one, which is called the spongy moth. It's another kind of a moth that is invasive species from Asia that we're looking at.
All right. Now, this is a question for both Laura and Jacob to wrap up. What inspired you to work in nature and biology in the national parks?
I can go first. What inspired me was to share my love for the environment and learn new fun facts that I can share with my friends and people around me, and then developing different tools to do just that, to reach students like our friends that are listening today, and share my love for the environment with them.
And for me, I always loved nature, and I thought that this is so precious, and we just, what can I do to contribute to protecting it? Because I think that every time you go to the forest, you're looking at some miraculous things, really. And I fell in love with the forest, and I fell in love with nature and wilderness, and I wanted to work in this environment. That's why I picked this field, and I love it. It's amazing.
All right, very cool. Well, before we wrap up, I want to throw a link up here for classrooms, exploringbytheseat.com/peak. We still have several live events coming up with the Western Mountain Parks before the school year ends. So do visit and register for some of those events. You'll also see there's a French page as well, because we do the events as well in French for our classrooms in Quebec, our French immersion schools in Alberta, BC, in Ontario, who join us quite often as well. So do check out those two pages. To our classrooms, thank you so much for being live with us today. To our classrooms on YouTube and our camera classrooms. And then Laura and Jacob, thank you for putting together a great presentation for us. Thank you for sharing your expertise and doing it in a really fun way with the stories and the visuals.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, we are going to sign off for now. Laura, I think we'll probably see you tomorrow. And for now, have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.